Figuring out the real Donald Trump, that's been a challenge since he first announced his candidacy. Is it a wall or is it a fence? Universal health care or not? You get the idea. Last night, Trump was here in D.C. and spoke before a group of donors. It was his first visit to the Capitol in weeks. Today, he released a picture on Facebook, which shows him working on his inaugural speech while visiting what he refers to as his winter house in Florida. To try to get a better sense of what makes the president-elect tick, we spoke to Trump ally Corey Lewandowski, who, of course, is a native of Lowell. So, despite the fact you're fired by the Trump campaign this summer, you maintain a close relationship with the candidate. What's your relationship like with the president-elect?
You know, I've been so blessed. I spent 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for 18 months by his side. And in that type of time frame, you get to know somebody. And you can either really like him or really hate him. And I think I was fortunate enough to really like him. We bonded. And, you know, my relationship is one where, he'll call me and he'll ask my opinion on things. And,
how often are you talking to him?
I talk to him pretty regularly. I was very, very fortunate this week. You know, I had to get a tuxedo to come down to the inauguration. Yeah. It's such a privilege. And I was at Men's Warehouse shopping in Salem, New Hampshire, and he called me. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm shopping for a tux."
The president-elect called you?
He called me, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm shopping for a tuxedo." He said, "How come?" I said, "Because I'm coming to your inauguration." And it was just such a nice thing. And he, you know, he talked about how big the inauguration is going to be done. Here it is. And it's going to be life-changing for a lot of people. And know that I had a very small part in getting him on the right track. It's pretty humbling.
Have you seen the inaugural speech or a draft of the inaugural speech?
I haven't, but I've heard about it.
Is it going to be a typical Trump in-your-face kind of thing or more traditional?
From what I heard, it's going to be under 20 minutes, which is much about half the time of a traditional rally that he's been doing. And I think it's going to be reflective of where the country was and where he wants to bring it. You
know, yesterday we saw the poll, 40% approval for Donald Trump. Same time, you know, this Barack Obama, 84. George W. Bush, I think, in the 60s. Do you worry about how that affects his ability to govern? I know he poo-pooed and said the polls were wrong during the campaign, but doesn't it embolden people like in the GOP? Some of the leaders in Congress don't agree with him on Medicare, on the repeal issue, on attacking Big Pharma. Do you worry about whether it emboldens them to the point that he has trouble passing the legislative agenda?
He's coming to Washington with the largest electoral victory in the Republicans since Ronald Reagan's re-election campaign. What that means is he's coming with a mandate. He's coming in with states that Republicans haven't won since 1984, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa, Florida, huge states. And what that also means is that the American people are going to hold those elected officials accountable. And if they don't move his agenda forward, they'll be reminded of that in 2 years.
Is it fair to say you're sort of the de facto chair of the Let Trump Be Trump movement? You are, right?
I'm not the chair. I'm the guy who came up with it.
You are.
Yeah,
okay,
of course.
So he got into this thing with John Lewis, civil rights icon, as you well know. He suggests that the alleged leaks by the intelligence community are reminiscent of Nazi Germany. Did Let Trump Be Trump go too far in either of those instances, Corey?
You have to remember, John Lewis said he was going to boycott this inauguration. He also boycotted George W. Bush's inauguration, right? So this isn't a new thing for John Lewis. This is hyper-partisan politics at its worst. When it comes to the leaks, what we saw was the mainstream media released a dossier on Donald Trump, which was completely and utterly false. And the only way he could fight back was through the use of social media and Twitter. See, if he didn't have that tool, what he'd be doing is he'd be stuck calling a press conference every day to respond to these things. And the CIA and the National Intelligence Agency should have never released a dossier which wasn't factually accurate. And then they backpedaled. You know what they said? Well, it wasn't our document.
So do you worry after the hits that the president-elect has taken at the intelligence community, do you worry at all about retaliation from the careerists who are just not happy about being compared to Nazi Germany?
I don't think so. Look, you've got Mike Pompeo coming in as the new director of Central Intelligence, hopefully. You get the former senator from Indiana, Coates, coming in as the director of National Intelligence. He's revamping the entire government, and what he's doing, he's coming into Washington with a fresh set of eyes. You know what that means? What's ever been done in the past doesn't mean it's going to be done in the future. He's looking at this holistically, completely reforming government. We saw he wants to cut government employees by 20%, cut spending by 10%. These are wholesale and fundamental changes. That means looking at the intelligence community. If they're not giving the best and most accurate information, someone should have an eye on that.
So let's get back local. You're a local kid, obviously. The punditry, it's a word I hate, by the way. Half the punditry said Mitt Romney was a serious candidate for Secretary of State. Half of the so-called punditry said this was purely an attempt by Donald Trump to humiliate a guy who had been a really vocal adversary. Who's right here, Corey?
And neither one of them are right. You know, 80% of the punditry said Donald Trump would never run for office, and here we are 2 days away from the swearing in of the next president of the United States, and it's Donald Trump.
So what's the Mitt Romney story?
You know what the Mitt Romney story is? Donald Trump is a person who brings people together. And I think it's fair to say that he and Mitt have had an adversarial relationship over the last 2 or 4 years. They both said things that they probably regret. Mitt went out in March and made the speech about Donald Trump. But you know what Donald Trump said? If Mitt Romney is the best person to run the State Department, then I'm going to put my differences aside if he's the right person. And he vetted him, and he decided to go in a different direction. But he gave him a very clean, fair shot. And I think that's what you want from the president.
So that would suggest you don't think he's a vengeful guy. A lot of people in Massachusetts are nervous. When Richard Nixon won the White House, you probably know this, he shut down the Charlestown Navy Yard and look at the smile on the retaliation for that one state holdout. Seth Moulton likened Donald Trump to the Nazis. Elizabeth Warren and he were at it all the time. Charlie Baker didn't vote for him and wasn't very kind to him early on. Should we worry back home, your home state, should we worry that this new president is going to take out some of that on Massachusetts, federal reimbursements, Medicaid waiver, whatever it is?
You know what Donald Trump's going to do? He's going to bring jobs to Massachusetts. He won 49% in the primary in Massachusetts in a 16-person field. That means the American people, my hometown, Lowell, Massachusetts, turned out in record numbers for Donald Trump, right? Worcester, Massachusetts did a massive rally. They turned out in record numbers. Tingsboro, Massachusetts, we brought Donald Trump there. You know what he's going to do? He doesn't care about a respective state like that. Anywhere where we can create jobs. And what that means is these industries that have not been negotiating with the federal government, if they're Raytheon, if they're not doing their best to bring their prices down and increase jobs in Massachusetts, that's where Donald Trump's going to hold companies responsible.
So we shouldn't worry.
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we heard about draining the
Plus
swamp.
we get Tom Brady, right? And you know Tom Brady's.
You got a football over there, too. So draining the swamp. Isn't this the swamp? You're a block from the White House. You're incredibly close to the most powerful guy in the world, at least as of Friday. Isn't this the swamp we're sitting in, Corey?
You know what it is, Jim? It's so different. Anybody who thought that a kid from Lowell, Massachusetts, who went to public schools, who grew up with no money in a single-parent household was going to have the opportunity to come here, it's amazing. Look, this is the American dream, and I wake up every day and say, I can't believe it. Did I ever thought I was going to be back in Washington? Of course not. If anybody would have said to me 2 years ago when I took a job with Donald Trump, you're going to be coming back to Washington and maybe helping move his agenda forward, I would have taken that chance, and I did. The difference now is, you know what my role here is? My role is to make sure that when candidates are running in states where Donald Trump won, like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, we go out and we recruit good candidates to run against them so they can move the Trump agenda forward. That's part of what I'm going to accomplish.
So last thing, you told us when we came here, you're able to see the president's bedroom in the White House from the corner of your office. Are you going to be communicating late at night when he's tweeting it through? What's the deal? What have you worked out with the president?
I don't think the Secret Service would like me sending over a drone over the White House. I don't think I'd appreciate that too much for messages or a flashlight back and forth. And look, I don't know how much I'm going to be in the White House. What I do know is my job is to try and move the president's agenda forward and hold people accountable who aren't going to support that agenda. I think that's what the American people want.
Corey, it's a pleasure. Thanks so
much
for
honor.
your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.